Hello and welcome to the Leaders Council podcast, the podcast for the people who run the country and the people who keep the country running. You join us on yet another sunny day here in the capital. I'm Matthew O'Neill, and today, as always, we ensure that we have a variety of distinct perspectives on leadership. First, we're joined by Andy Baines, founder and managing director of Planet BOFA, the leading online formative learning platform. Andy, hello.
Hello, Matthew. Thank you for inviting me on the show.
Well, thank you for coming on to the program. We might as well dive straight in. What does the word leader mean to you?
Gosh, lots of things. Always a tricky question now. I think it's just sort of being prepared to take decisions and move forward and helping other people out.
And how would you describe your personal leadership style?
A lot of trust, I think. It's a case of working together as a team. I don't know whether or not the people that I work with would necessarily sort of say that I am leading them. I think it's just a case of working together and listen to ideas. And that sometimes when you've got a crucial decision to make, then that rests on my shoulders.
Now, of course, you're in a very interesting field at the moment, being that you are quite involved with distance learning. As this current outbreak proceeds, I'm sure that you're going to get quite the uptick in those needing tutors. How are you managing to cope with the increased demand?
Well, it's just a case of expanding with the servers and firing them up and having that phone support. And we have just offered that out to all the state schools, primary schools, use of the platform for free where the schools are closed. And hopefully the system should be able to cope with that demand and be flexible and always be able to respond to it.
And do you foresee any sort of challenges that might arise for your business in this time?
When you say a challenge, what do you mean by that?
Well, of course, this is going to have a major impact on personnel. And at the best of times, sometimes it can be challenging to lead people. Do you feel that this is going to be a difficult time for business to be able to keep their employees motivated and high morale?
No, I don't think so. I think quite the opposite. Half the thing about doing something is not necessarily feeling as if you're doing work. It's a case of feeling as if you're supplying a service and helping people out. And I think as things become busier and more demanding, it's a case of you're feeling as if you're doing more good. It's a case of making sure, I think, that you're not overstretching and not overworking people.
Let's go back to the very beginning of your career, the start of your working life. Were there any particular influences on you, whether it be someone you either worked with or for, or a set of circumstances that formed the way that you lead today? Probably, yeah. So it's sort of, one of my first headmasters, so I mean, teaching 25 years before I ended up setting up the online learning platform. And my first headmaster when I was teaching a school in Nairobi he was a fantastic, inspirational chap, David Marshall. And Weiss was there not long out there. My father had unfortunately passed away. He was ill, and he just put me on a plane, sent me back, and this was back in the June time. This is 95, and he said, "Don't come back until September." And I just thought, for someone to have that much faith and confidence and support, considering I'd only been working for a few months, was fantastic. And I think that sort of, try and emulate that. And do you try and pass on the lessons learned from him to your current staff?
Yeah, I think what's important is trying to learn and move on, and if you can help people to advance and get to a better position, to the extent that they could go and get a much better job elsewhere, then that's fantastic. And just hopefully that you can create that opportunity for them and that they'd want to stay.
Now, of course, there are new people entering the world of work every day. If a new person was to enter into your employ, what would be your first piece of advice to them?
Ooh, first piece of advice. I think just whatever you put into a job, you should get out. So the more you put in, then the better it will be. And I think that it's that case of just give it your best shot, and don't worry about making mistakes. We all make mistakes. It's a case of just putting them to one side and learning from them, and admitting those mistakes. I think is vitally important.
Now, of course, there are many different sorts of leadership and many different leaders, but if I pinned you down to just one, if you were to objectively identify the greatest leader, living or dead, who would that be? I know it's rather tricky.
And there's one tricky, and I think it's two: Mandela and Branson. I think Mandela for inspirational feel for moving forward, but I think in the world of work, I think Richard Branson's probably the one is being able to sort of take a brand and develop a lot around it, and the way he deals with his staff, etc., is good.
What do the two of them have in common?
From what I understand, I've never met either of them, but I have met people who have met both of them, and there's something about them that's sort of when people say when they're in their room or in their space or environment, gives them a lot of encouragement, a lot of enthusiasm, and that desire to that you can achieve something and make something.
So it's more of a personal magnetism that enables them to go forward in their successful careers. Would you say that would be true?
Yeah, I almost understand it. Yeah, and I think that's what I admire about them.
Now, unfortunately, our time together is quickly running short. Do you foresee in the next, let's say, 6 to 8 months, a higher demand for your service due to the current health situation?
Yeah, I mean, that sort of learning would definitely, there will be a demand for people looking for other ways round to be able to deliver learning than just being face-to-face and looking for other tools. And that demand, will extend out. And I mean, we're already seeing it now. We've been seeing it greatly, and we are always expanding out to be able to extend into other fields. And also the advancement with AI is fascinating. How it can learn those different techniques. We have one of our main principles with our learning. Again, it's all about this making mistakes thing. The whole platform works on that, so it uses formative learning to do it. And the idea of looking to see where we've got the misunderstandings and trying to fill those gaps. And one thing is, for example, to see how long someone's most optimum time with which they should wait before they recheck with that learning. And to enforce it in the long-term knowledge, and AI will be fantastic with that, and we're working on that. And also just selecting processes out. It could be a very interesting time, I would say, in the next 12 months to 24 months with regard to online learning.
Well, Andy, it's been an absolute pleasure having a conversation with you today on leadership, and I really hope that you can come back on the program at some point in the near future. Andy, thank you.
Thank you. I'd love to. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Matthew.
That was Andy Baines, founder and managing director of Planet BOFA. And now, if you haven't heard it before, it's Jonathan White's exclusive interview with Lord Blunkett.
We're joined today by David Blunkett, Lord Blunkett, former Home Secretary, former Education Secretary. David, thank you very much for joining us today.
You're very welcome.
It's always a pleasure, but since we are talking around the theme of leadership, it would be remiss of me if we didn't start with the leadership election going on in the Labour Party. Apart from, I'm sure, your delight that a certain someone is leaving a post, what are your thoughts on it so far?
Well, I think the party membership are going to make a very clear decision. Are they in the stands watching, or are they on the pitch playing? And if they want to play, then the two candidates that are in for the future are Lisa Nandy and Keir Starmer. I'm personally backing Lisa because I think she's a brave woman with a tremendous amount to give. She's got really good, positive ideas. I like them because they're about building from the community rather than command and control from the centre. They're about a new form of social democracy and socialism rather than trying to replicate a failed past. And she can reach out to people that others can't. So I'm giving her my backing. I think Keir Starmer is very professional, very able, and presents extremely well. And I hope that one of those two actually come through in the election on the 4th of April.
There has been a lot of criticism, especially from four candidates a little further left than them, who've criticised even the last Labour government as being part of 40 years of Thatcherism.
Yes, I think it's really unfortunate, particularly when new MPs come in having seen large swathes of their colleagues lose their seat, to roll up the 13 years of Labour government with everything that I'm so proud of. I mean, we were not neoliberals or anything like it. We were able, in the first 10 years certainly, which I played a part in, to be able to turn the economy around, to invest in health and education, to be able to transform people's aspirations and their hopes for the future. And that included ensuring people got the minimum wage, which we never had before, Sure Start to nurture youngsters from the moment they were born, transformation in the quality of education. And all these things actually add up to helping people to improve and change their lives for the better. And anyone who thinks that's not good and that isn't a government to be proud of needs to answer the question, what shibboleth is it that you would want that would actually have done more to change those lives? I can think of two or three myself in terms of dramatically taking on inequality, although 500,000 children were taken out of poverty in those years. I can think of being even tougher on crime, even though I was dubbed as one of the tougher Home Secretaries, because the people that I cared about most were, on the whole, not exclusively, but mainly the victims of crime. I can think about taking on the very, very rapidly growing transnational power of the big tech companies, which we still need to work through in terms of how we do that from a single nation just off the coast of Europe, and how we work internationally without getting caught up in wars we don't want to be involved in. But how are we international in a way that ensures that we play our part in making a better life for humanity as a whole, rather than disengaging and becoming alien from the rest of the world? Those are big questions for the social democratic left, particularly with artificial intelligence and robotics changing the world of work forever, I think, in the next 20 years. An ageing population. Labour got 18% of the over 65 vote in the general election. Just 18%. It's staggeringly.
It's extraordinary.
Staggeringly bad. And climate change, which we all know is going to be either a big gain or a terrific political trauma. We've got to take people with us.
No matter which political party it is, the changes that will occur in this decade especially will determine their future ideologies, certainly. And speaking of your time as Home Secretary in government, you worked with so many different individuals of all political stripes and none at all. Is there someone, and on the theme of leadership, that stands out to you that embodies some of those qualities you described earlier?
Yes, I mean, it's on the theme of bottom up. It was some of the most inspiring head teachers and classroom teachers who, in really, really difficult circumstances, were actually transforming the life chances of children by inspiring those children to want to learn, to, if you like, lighting a candle inside them, giving them a window on the world, which created an inquiring mind and an understanding that the world was their oyster, that they could do things with support. My philosophy has always been mutuality and reciprocity. We need mutuality to support each other. We need reciprocity in terms of understanding that we don't just take, we give a lot as well. And I suppose that really comes down to if you're prepared to do something for yourself, we're prepared to do something to help you. And that's fundamentally in education, but it is in all sorts of walks of life as well. So you can have innovation, you can have entrepreneurship and creativity in business, you can have the way in which people turn things around for themselves. Small businesses have done that, the contribution to new ways of doing things, of thinking differently about our economy. Those are all grit to the mill. Those are the things we need to do. And we can do them together. It's not that you're on the side of the devil if you're an entrepreneur, or you're on the side of the angels if you work in public services. We are dependent on each other.
You can't have one without the other.
Yes.
And I think, to coin a term, extraordinary, ordinary people, and especially when it comes to, given your answer, David, to teachers, to carers, people that honestly don't get the recognition they deserve on a day-to-day basis. And without them, half of society wouldn't function.
Completely. I call it civil society, which functions even when government isn't functioning. It's the glue that holds things together. It's people working and living and having their being together and recognising that they are dependent on each other. I've obviously met incredibly inspiring leaders in a different vein. I was very fortunate to have met Nelson Mandela 3 times. I met Bill Clinton a number of times, both of whom, in very, very different ways, were inspiring leaders. I've met people in leadership positions who couldn't take a decision to save their lives. Tony Blair famously said in his conference speech the year before he stood down as Prime Minister, and I knew exactly what he meant. He said the worst ministers are those who won't take decisions, and anyone in a leadership role needs to, A, know why they're there, what they intend to do with the authority that goes with being a leader and a manager, and then how to draw people in as a team to be able to implement it so that it's a team approach. It's not someone out on a white charger. It's someone who can mobilise, motivate, provide incentives for people to feel that they're part of the solution as well.
And I think whether it's politics, whether it's business, whether it's sport, it's exactly those qualities that you need to succeed in any of them.
Yes, it is. And if people recognise that and they have a clear idea themselves, they have and build, because you can build, leadership qualities. They know how to manage their own time and their own emotions, because we all, from time to time, feel like really losing our temper, and I don't pretend for a minute over the years that I haven't. How to control your own feelings and emotion, and how to bring the best out in other people's. How you work out that people who are really good don't threaten you, they complement you. People who have complementary skills to you are really valuable. And I suppose the ability to listen, not just for its own sake, but to listen because you are conglomerating, I suppose you would call it plagiarizing, thoughts, ideas, ways forward from everyone around you. I often think that football managers wouldn't do too bad a job if they actually talk to the fans after the game.
Well, everyone knows, David, you're a big Sheffield Wednesday fan.
I know.
Can't be easy having to hear the praise of Chris Wilder and Sheffield United every week after week.
No, it isn't, although it's damn good for Sheffield, so I'm being a bit magnanimous at the moment.
That's very good
about
of you.
Sheffield United in the Premier League, because it's change. It does change. It lifts the image of the city internationally. If you're not just because it's Sheffield United, but because if you're playing Liverpool and you're playing Man City, then that's a global audience. You're immediately beamed across the world. So that's good. I could cry sometimes. We can beat Brighton, Premier League side, in the FA Cup at Brighton. We can beat Leeds at Leeds. I was there when we beat them 2-0 in January.
And then you can lose 5-0.
And then you lose 5-0
Blackburn.
at home to Blackburn, and half the fans were out of the ground by the half time.
What would a manager Blunkett say in this situation?
I would have asked myself a very simple question. What went wrong with motivating those players so that when they came out on the field, they walked instead of ran? They didn't have any of the passion they'd had the week before at Leeds. They showed no drive and incentive to take hold of the game. What went wrong with the same players who'd played very well the week previously? And if you could answer that question, and something may have happened, who knows, something during the morning before the game started, something may have gone sour. You get the answer to that question, and you then start to ensure that we never do this again.
Yeah, well, I'm a Chelsea fan, so I'm beginning to feel your pain at the minute. But I would like to pick up on another point you just made, actually, David, about choosing a strong team, people that complement you. A lot of criticism that Theresa May got as Prime Minister was that she tended not to pick, perhaps, the more ambitious, the more ministers that might well challenge her. One of Boris Johnson's, for all his faults, he has been said in the past, he's a man that picks people that are good at their briefs. Do you agree with that?
Well, I'll reserve judgment on that until I see the outcome of the reshuffle, which, as we record this podcast, has not yet happened. And I imagine I would be very surprised if he didn't have quite a brutal reshuffle, not just to get people in who he likes, but people who are going to be really sparky and able and clear at doing the job, because you can have all the best ideas in the world, you can pronounce on what you're going to do, but if you haven't got leaders in those departments prepared to do it, if they're just toadies, by the way, and there is a tendency, a new Prime Minister, large majority, got to be very careful that you don't pick people because you're receiving the echo of your own voice when you're speaking to them, but get able people in. I won't comment on some of the less able, but there are clearly in the cabinet as I speak at the moment people who are really just not up to it. I mean, incidentally, anyone who won't be cross-examined by decent journalists on the BBC, who've changed their minds recently about Sky, isn't worth their salt. But part of being cross-questioned is to demonstrate to yourself that you've got a grasp of your brief, that you believe in it, and that you can persuade people of it. And if you can't do that under real cross-examination rather than sitting on the sofa for an easy morning television program, get out of the business. Don't do it.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
And also, I should add, that is how Leaders of All Stripes earn that respect in the first place. But there is a question, isn't there?
I'm trying to answer the questions. That's what I always tried to answer the questions.
Or be very good at avoiding them. Either way.
The way of avoiding them is to take it head on and say, I'm not going to answer that question, explain why.
Quite. And I think that one of the great things about the Leaders Council especially is that it takes and talks to people, again, from all different backgrounds, leading something very different, whether it's a charity, whether it's a business, whether it's in politics. There comes points, though, and David, you must have experienced this, whether as leading Sheffield City Council or as Home Secretary, when people are looking at you for leadership, where do you get your strength from?
I think there's something inside all of us. There's a tenacity, there's an ambition, there's a desire to get things done, to make a difference inside you, whether you're in public service, the charities, or you're driving a business that actually says, this is why I get up in the morning. So you've got to have something internal to yourself. The second is the satisfaction you get back, because you do, from seeing things change for the better. You can take pride without being egotistical. There's nothing wrong with being proud of what you do and to want to do it even better. And that's why you need both sharp minds around you. In my case, it was special advisors as well as ministers. I pretty well picked my ministers. Sometimes Tony asked me to take people who I was a little bit iffy about, and we had to meld people into the team. I was able to pick all my own special advisors, and that really did make a difference. But in the end, you've got to like what you're doing. I mean, the people who are unhappy in their skin, it's very difficult to perform if you're in the wrong business or in the wrong department of a business, or if you're really hating teaching, or in politics, you're just in the wrong department. I was very lucky because education and employment were my first loves in terms of what I wanted to do, and I got the job for 4 years. I'd then come to the conclusion that there were really big challenges for us. It turned out even bigger than I expected with the attack on the World Trade Center 3 months after I became Home Secretary. But the big challenges of security, of reducing crime, of dealing with the development of positive citizenship, which also had a read over in terms of immigration, the kind of things that change people's lives either for the better or the worse. And you don't get everything right. That's the other thing you've got to recognise, which is why being part of a broader team, being able to take criticism but not always accept it, because otherwise you blow with the wind, that's the measure. And I think if we can share those traits, those experiences, those different elements through the Leadership Council, if we can get people from very, very different leadership managerial roles and delivery roles to actually be able to share that experience, everyone will gain something from it, because that dialogue will inform, it will avoid people reinventing the wheel, it will take people a lot further than the niche, for good or ill, the niche that they're in at the moment.
David, in a couple of minutes we have left, I will be mean and put you on the spot and ask you for predictions perhaps in 3 things. What will happen in the Labour leadership contest? How will the next few months go for the government after Brexit, after we leave the European Union on the 31st of January? And where will Sheffield Wednesday finish in the league?
Lord above. I'm not sure which is the most difficult of those questions. I've already indicated where my support is for the Labour leadership. If we take it at the end of January 2020, Keir Starmer has clearly got off to a very, very strong start. I think, however, it will be very much down to who can reach those parts of the Labour Party membership that came in on the back of Jeremy Corbyn's election in 2015 to that post, who can be persuaded that what they want to see and the big changes they'd like to enact can only be brought about in any form if we win, and we win back the tragic loss of people on our side in December 2019, and that's got to be Lisa Nandy or Keir. On the next few months, I think that the government will probably do quite well. I think that there are real dangers ahead in just having 11 months to negotiate trade deals, especially with bellicose pronouncements about we're not going to have alignment, as though alignment in itself is a bad thing when some of it will be very good. So I think there are dangers, but I think there's quite a bit of momentum going with the government at the moment, and that will be reflected in relationships, in doing deals in Europe and facing outwards to the rest of the world. Sheffield Wednesday, God help me. I mean, how is it that 2 of the things that are most important to me, other than my family and loved ones, is football and politics? I think Sheffield Wednesday will be hard-pressed now to get into the playoffs. If we do, I think we could pull it off, but I am really reluctant.
And I think on that prediction, your reputation will be judged. Lord Blunkett, thank you very much for joining us today.
God bless you, Jonathan.
This has been the Leaders Council podcast. Thank you for celebrating excellence in leadership with us. I have been your host, Matthew O'Neill. Until next time, goodbye. Thank you for listening to our podcast. The views expressed within the podcast do not reflect the views of the Leaders Council of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, its parent company or subsidiaries, members of staff, other guests, or any other person therein associated.